I believe it is reasonable to assume that the vast majority, if not every single one of you watching this video, has heard of the worst disease outbreak in mankind's history. The disease that makes our current COVID-19 pandemic look like a common cold. I'm, of course, talking about the Black Death. In this video, I will be covering the horrible disease that was the Black Death and the devastating impact it had on the country of England in particular. According to the Chronicle of the Grey Friars at King's Lynn, the plague first arrived in England via a ship that had sailed from Gascony in southwestern France to Malcolm, normally referred to as Weymouth today, in Dorset. The first known case in England appears to be a seaman who arrived on that ship shortly before the feast of St. John the Baptist on the 24th of June, 1348. From Weymouth, the disease then spread rapidly across the southwest of England. The first major city in the country to be struck by the illness was Bristol. From its new home of Bristol, the disease then continued its rapid spread and reached London, the largest city in England at the time, with some 70,000 inhabitants, in the autumn of 1348, just a few months after its initial arrival. Predictably, its arrival in London only hastened its spread across the country. Fortunately for the inhabitants of London, the full effect of the plague wouldn't be felt in London until early 1349. Unluckily for them, though, the conditions in London were ideal for the plague. The streets were narrow and flowing with sewage, and houses were overcrowded and poorly ventilated. By March 1349, the disease was spreading incredibly quickly across all of southern England. Unfortunately for the northern half of the country, this rapid spread in the south was a mere precursor of things to come, and during the first half of 1349, the disease spread northwards. A second front opened up in the north when the plague arrived by ship at the Humber, after which it spread both south and north. In May, it reached York, the third largest city in the country, home to some 10,000, and during the summer months of June, July, and August, it would only continue its slaughter as it ravaged the northern counties as a whole. Unfortunately for some northern counties, such as Durham and Cumberland, they had already been the victim of violent incursions from the Scots, which made them particularly vulnerable to the devastating effects of the plague. Fortunately for the entire country, though, like many illnesses, the Black Death spreads less rapidly in the winter months, and although it had survived the previous winter of 1348 to 1349, it would not survive the coming one, and by December 1349, conditions were returning to relative normality. It had taken the disease approximately 500 days to traverse the entire country, leaving death and destruction in its wake. Before discussing the ultimate death toll, I feel I should describe the actual symptoms of this terrible illness so we can further understand what the victims of this horrific disease went through. Like many illnesses, the Black Death took many forms, but the most common symptoms included headaches, fever, vomiting, painful swellings on the neck, armpits, and groin known as buboes, dark blisters, bruises, and coughing up blood. This knowledge only deepens the sorrow for its victims, knowing that all those poor people would have likely died horrific and painful deaths. But exactly how many people suffered this terrible fate? It is hard to tell the exact death toll in England, as even the actual population at the time is up for debate. However, most modern historians tend to agree that the death toll in England was somewhere between 40 and 60% of the entire population of the country. This horrific death toll was likely down to a few reasons, including, but not limited to, the lack of cleanliness and sanitation in the major cities, as well as the lack of effective treatments, with many of the so-called treatments potentially hastening a victim's death. Various treatment methods were used throughout the plague's lifespan, including sweating, bloodletting, forced vomiting, and urinating. Within the initial phase of the disease, bloodletting was used and was performed on the same side of where the buboes or risings appeared. For example, if a rising appeared on the right side of the groin, the physician would bleed a vein in the ankle on the same side. In the case of sweating, the sufferer would be given medications such as mithridate, Venus triacal, Matiolus, bezoar water, serpentary roots, and Electarium de ovo. Sweating was usually reserved when measures were desperate. If a patient had tokens, a severe version of risings, the physician would wrap the naked patient in a blanket drenched in cold water before giving them the medications previously mentioned. The desired effect was to make the patient sweat violently and thus purge all corruption from the blood which was caused by the disease. I have yet to mention the most common method of treatment, however, which was to lance or burst buboes, which was first adopted after it was noticed that those patients whose buboes had burst often survived the disease. This, unsurprisingly, would have been extremely painful. Sadly, although somewhat predictably, given the horrific death toll, none of these treatments worked, leaving the people of the time at the mercy of this terrible illness. Well, that's the story of how the Black Death brought England to its knees. There's so much more I could have covered, but wanted to keep this video short and sweet. If you had any ideas or recommendations for future videos, I'd love to hear them, so make sure to let me know in the comment section. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed if you'd like to see more videos like this. But with all that being said, I hope you guys have a great day, night, wherever you are, and I hope to see you lovely people in the next one.